March 6, 2024 edition of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. It's Women's History Month, so this is brought to you by the National Urban League. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of the Harlem, New York diversity recruitment firm East Coast Executives. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. The Digital Career Success Series, DCSS, is a professional development series that helps members of our Urban League Young Professional chapters and other job seekers develop new skill sets that will enhance their careers through digital platforms such as webinars, Facebook, and Instagram Live. The goal is to provide an opportunity for professional development right from one's computer. If you want more, visit us at nuljobsnetwork.com. Wow. To our employers that are on Zoom today, the National Urban League consistently connects diverse talent with great opportunities. Today's Digital Career Success Series, Empowering Futures, Women Leading the Way in DEI, features two friends, actually, Tyra L. Orange and Kim Barker. Really excited to have both on today. Man, I guess it's time to get it started. Tyra, we're going to start off with you. Welcome to the Digital Career Success Series.
Thank you so much for having me this morning and this afternoon. It's great to be here with you and Kim. Thanks for having me. Excited about the conversation.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. You know, I always tell people that you show up as a friend every time I see you. I did an event here in Harlem and you showed up with an entire ERG, BRG team to support the event. Talk about waving the flag and leading DEI. It seems like that's what you do naturally. So tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Absolutely. So my background is really in executive administration and working closely with leadership to, drive strategy within, the organizations that I worked within. And, one of those strategies that was particularly meaningful to me was being intentional around our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. And so I transitioned over to this work several years ago. And in this role, I'm driving, strategy for the organization, leading BRGs, employing the 4C model of waving the flag on culture and community. And so, that event at TEDx Harlem is an example of, some of the things that we do, client-facing events as well, and just really being intentional about how we drive solutions to help the most marginalized folks, within our organization and the community at large.
Yeah, I really appreciate you and the work you're doing over there at TD Cowen. So thank you so very much. I'm going to take this opportunity now to introduce our audience to Kim Barker. Kim, listen, Kim, I don't even know if I have to introduce you to the National Urban League audience because you showed up in the past as a friend, as a colleague, as an ally, and worked. I know you've done some virtual stuff with us. You showed up in Washington, D.C. I remember going over to the panel discussion and seeing you do what you do. Always a professional. I wanted you to be a part of this conversation because I know in your past career life, you led DEI initiatives for organizations, but then you were able to kind of transition and you have a unique perspective about how that still is woven into the work that you do. But let's just speak about the work that you're doing now.
Sure. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be part of the National Urban League family. And also, Ken hails from my hometown of New York, Harlem, New York in particular. So it's a thrill to be here. Yes, I am probably a really good example of someone who has had the opportunity to pivot in her career in ways that have allowed for growth. Probably in directions that I could not imagine. I am a lawyer. I've been practicing lawyer for more years than I'm going to share here, primarily in the public law and governmental space for many decades in the city of Chicago, which is where I moved after graduating from law school in New York. I lead Bally's global legal compliance and ESG teams right now. And I sit on our executive leadership team reporting to our CEO, Robeson Reeves. And my job is to ensure that I bring a business and legal lens to ensure that we support our global strategic initiatives. I want to just give a moment to tell you a little bit about Bally's. We're one of the leading entertainment companies with millions of players that are kind of spread across digital gaming and also casinos. And in New York, if you're in New York, we are now the proud owners of Bally Links, which is a golf course that was under previous management before Bally's took it over. So if you're in New York, it is a community golf course. We would love to have you. We also just opened City of Chicago's very first casino. And so that's the space that Bally's operates in, and having a connection to community and having empowered employees is critical. And so I have been able to leverage both my legal experience, my role in DEI, and now here at Bally's to really help more inform our global DEI strategy and to help support it as an executive sponsor. We have an incredible global DEI leader. I'm going to give her a shout out. Her name is Tracy Wiley, and she does an amazing job. And our role on the executive leadership team at Bally's is to support that and to really be visible examples of what leadership looks like when they show up for DEI in a very, very authentic way. Thank you.
You know, we know Bally's has a huge, just a huge footprint out here. And we believe the Digital Career Success Series does a good job of that as well. So listen, to anyone that's attending, please drop where you're from in the chat. Let's make it interactive. Kim and Tyra, we have a great audience. I know they are excited for the opportunity to join us in a Q&A, probably at around, I don't know, 12:45. So we'll get to Q&A. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the Q&A. But if you're in the chat, let us know where you're from. All right. So listen, this conversation is about women leading the way and DEI. But I think it's really good to kind of frame that conversation by first talking about what DEI is or what it even means to you. So Kim, I'm gonna come directly to you to just kind of speak about some of these pillars that are a part of this conversation.
Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite things to do, which is to make sure we're talking the same language around DEI. What I'd like to say is the D in it is really the fact. It's the fact that we are people who have different backgrounds, different lived experiences, different professional experiences, and different perspectives. And that is, you know, that's the D, the diversity. It's that mix, that what makes you unique, but collectively makes us all unique as a community. I'm going to hop over to inclusion, because inclusion is, I think, the way that you leverage diversity to create a positive organizational culture that embraces the diversity in your organization. But I think if it's being done right, it is also aligning with the business strategies within a company. And those combinations work really, really well. And then there's equity. And equity is just to make sure, I think equity should be the undercurrent for all DEI work. And it's just to make sure that in policy and practice and procedures, that we are ensuring that each of the people within our organization is getting what they need to succeed, is given what they need to lend their voice so that we can have a more inclusive culture. So those three things work together, I think, in a powerful triangle to really support DEI initiatives in organizations.
Well, Tyra, you know, Kimberly talks about those things working together to create a powerful triangle. I love that. And I know that you're kind of hands-on right now. You're really in an organization doing the work, kind of handling things through transitions and different things that are happening within an organization. How does that play into your day-to-day responsibilities? Like when you get to the office and you start kind of leaning in on your strategic plan, tell us a little bit about how you view diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So, you know, in the day-to-day practice of it, you know, I mentioned earlier that 4C model that we leverage, you know, it's really important that leadership takes, you know, real ownership of the work that we're doing here. And, you know, in working with the leadership team to make sure that we are driving that policy and practice, and that, you know, the strategy is being led from the top down. And then there are the community pieces, you know, external partnerships, you know, coming on and talking with you and the folks here at the National Urban League, you know, is one of the key partners for TD. And those partnerships are really core to making sure that we are leaving a good blueprint in the places where we live and work and do business. Internally, BRGs, making sure that we are building community for the folks that are within the organization, and giving them the opportunities they need to thrive within the organization. And our clients, making sure that when a deal team shows up to pitch a deal, that there is diverse representation within that deal team, and that we are really being intentional about the way we go about the work that we're doing.
Staying intentional is always so important. As a third-party search firm and diversity recruitment and talent acquisition partner, we speak about representation and intentionality a lot as we start to kind of weed through the clients that we work with and pursue opportunities. We like to see that, because we believe that then there's some genuine commitment to DEI when we see that organizationally. I think one of the things that we've spoke about in the past, Tyra, you often speak about the historical perspective as it relates to Black women in the DEI space. Let's just dive into that. And Kim, you can join us, please. But Tyra, I'd like to kind of hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it is Women's History Month, and you have two Black women on this call today in conversation with you. And so I think it's important that we recognize that Black women have been at the forefront of creating innovative strategies and tools to address systemic inequities. And we live within the intersections of gender and race, and so historically, we've always been working towards, creating those solutions based on our lived experience. And so even if you look back in history at folks that did not have a formal DEI role, you look at someone like Mary Church Terrell, who was a prominent civil rights activist and suffragist. And she's advocated for years for women and African American folks. Dorothy Height, National Council of Negro Women, who was addressing issues of race and gender inequality. Septima Clark, promoting education and voting rights. And even if you look more recently to today, someone like Tarana Burke, who started the Me Too movement. Black women have really been at the forefront of this work, whether we had the title or not. And so I don't know if anybody remembers, but Trevor Noah, when he was closing out his show, he did a whole ode to Black women. And I'm not going to use his language exactly, but he said that the reason why we're at this very special place of being in service to this type of work is because we can't afford not to. Just because of our unique place within society, we have to be at the forefront of building these solutions.
And listen, I know people want to look some of these people up. This version of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series, should I say this edition, will be live on the YouTube channel, the Urban League Jobs Network YouTube channel, for you to review at a later date. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. Tyra, what are we talking about here? You're giving us a history lesson. But Kim, it's interesting, as I was listening to some of the names that Tyra mentioned and thinking about your background as an attorney, as a lawyer, there were some real legal issues that took place to create some of this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Do you mind speaking about a little bit of that and how that background has helped you kind of still stay, I guess, in the forefront of just DEI in general?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, Tyra, thank you. Just well said. We say it's a labor of love, and then you quoted Mary Church Terrell, where she would say, "Lifting as we climb," and that was a collective community effort to think about. You cannot separate the interests of Black women from our community, and I just want to say thank you for putting it in that historical perspective. But yes, I mean, DEI is derivative of the civil rights movement. And a lot of the litigation that came out of that, including what was positively at the time referred to as affirmative action, which was really equity measures to ensure that corporations, schools, and others actually embraced the mandate for desegregation, the mandate for equal access. And so what we've seen is the work has evolved. And I think the title DEI looks different sometimes within the organization that you sit. And so from a corporate perspective, we're thinking about corporate organizations. I think what we're seeing right now in terms of challenges to DEI, both legally, I think in the public and in other places, is pushback that's not actually altogether unfamiliar. And so I think it causes us to be a little bit more sharp in terms of how we formulate DEI programs and strategies within organizations, within colleges and universities, and not just to comply with the law, but to make sure that they're actually meeting what the mandate is from your boards and other things. And so, not that where we are is a good place by any means, but I do think that it is always important to look at, reevaluate the strategy to make sure it's meeting what the goals and objectives of an organization are. And looking at a DEI strategy in supplier diversity, looking at a DEI strategy in your community engagement programs, looking at a DEI strategy, which is where most people look at it in hiring and retention, they all have to work together. And where those priorities align will really depend upon your business, will depend upon the will of your board, but we've always got to take a look at those things. But make no mistake, I mean, this is all derivative of the work that many of our ancestors and our forefathers and foremothers have done in this civil rights space. We're just carrying the work in a different way.
Carrying it indeed. This conversation, as we positioned it from a National Urban League standpoint, the Urban League Jobs Network, we positioned it as an impactful initiative conversation, right? We positioned it as forging forward to how DEI is operating across industries. But I think it's really important to kind of speak to, as Cam and Tyra both mentioned, kind of where it came from and what it came out of. And Tyra, you had spoke about adopting a triage method in DEI efforts. And when I saw that slide, it really caught my attention because you were talking about interventions and addressing the most severe forms of harm experienced, the uplift marginalized groups across the industry, right? I mean, across the organization. So with that being said, you want to tap into some of that and your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if there are any other DEI practitioners on this call, I think everybody is familiar with the term quick wins. And we all go into, this work in an organization, a lot of folks do, with the thought, okay, what wins can we get under our belt quickly? But this work takes time and it needs to be intentional. And there was an article by DEI consultant Amira Barger, who talked about the hospital triage method. And, what she talks about is that, in a hospital, the patient who is most in crisis and at the margins of irreparable harm is the one that needs to receive the most intense level of care, the most intense level of support so that they can not only thrive, but survive. And I think that any of the DEI interventions that we create, they've got to be designed with that model in mind. And intersectionality really has to be at the forefront of the decisions and the considerations that we make because, we're also interconnected. We have to think that way. And she uses as an example of this, the curb cut effect, which is a phenomenon that was brought about when small ramps were cut into the curb of sidewalks at intersections to allow for people with disabilities better access, right? And that was a great intervention, but what they discovered was that it had benefits way beyond what it was originally intended. And so even though it was meant specifically for wheelchair access, people that rode bikes and carrying strollers, travelers that have luggage, they all needed that solution as well. And so, before it was just, a feature to have that was an intervention for people with disabilities. And now it is, standard, right? Because it was an intervention that uplifted everyone.
I always know we're headed in the right direction when I look into the chat and see somebody put yes with an exclamation mark. That's when I'm like, okay, we moving. So at 12:19 that happened. That means we're ahead of pace, right? So we're moving really good. Want to say hello to all the people that checked in. I see Roshan Preston from the Philly Urban League is here as well. Thank you so very much for joining us today. We're speaking about DEI today with Tyra L. Orange and Kim Barker. So I'd like to kind of tap in on a couple different things. Let's talk about the importance of DEI initiatives, focusing on long-term change in general. So of course, you talk about addressing pay equity. We have a conversation about that in the future here on the Digital Career Success Series. So let's not tap into that too heavy, but accountability measures, prioritizing recruiting, hiring, and retention, right? And investing in resources for historically marginalized communities. So I'd like to just start here with accountability measures, tracking progress, holding leaders accountable. I know you sit in the C-suite, Kim. So how does that information come up to you? Like, I know people often sit in an organization and they say, well, I don't feel like I have the ear of the C-suite when it comes to this type of thing. How do people best kind of get their initiatives heard or their voices heard, and then what is the responsibility of leadership at that point?
I just to back up, I think leadership and in particular managers need to be part of that triage, because the undercurrent of a lot of DEI programs is really the work, the advocacy, and the confidence level of leaders and managers to be able to address and implement many of the measures that folks who are on the ground like Tyra in advancing DEI, a lot of that work and its effectiveness rests with people who are people managers and leaders. And so I think one of the areas of focus should always be to increase capacity, confidence, and ability to actually execute many of the interventions that come up. We can have every program and process in place, but if people don't feel confident and have the buy-in to actually execute, it's going to fall short. And I do think that starts within a board of an organization, and then within its executive leadership team. When I started, when I left the practice of law and worked in the DEI space, a significant amount of my time was spent on leadership development and developing the capacity and the buy-in of our leaders. And that was critical work because I was actually able to leverage that when we got into some of the more difficult programs that we were trying to implement, because our leaders felt really, really vested in it. And so I think that's a really good starting place. I'm really pleased to be at Bally's. I don't know if people know this, but the majority of our board and the majority of our executive leadership team, our C-suite, is actually people of color. And so some of the advocacy work that I found myself doing as a DEI practitioner, I can say to our DEI team, we're already there. Let's get to the work. How can we support you? And actually doing some of the more sophisticated work that we're doing in the community and understanding our customer base and ensuring alignment with our business. A lot of that work is already done. So the advocacy part, hopefully we don't have to spend as much time, and that's the ideal scenario for your board. That is the ideal scenario for your executive leadership team, because ultimately they will set the strategy and the priorities for the organization. But the tracking progress, I don't want to walk away from that. This should be data-driven, like any business decision. Understand the data, understand its importance to the business, and understand ways that are actually feasible for your organization to execute. What someone else is doing may not work in your organization, and data should tell you that, plus a gut instinct on what will work for your organization.
I'd
Really,
also add not to be afraid to pilot things, right?
Yes.
Because, in order to really track that data quarter over quarter or year over year, you've got to really, you've got to think outside of the box and occasionally try some interventions that haven't been done before. It's important to be innovative in this work, because if we had the answers, I wouldn't need to do this work. Kim wouldn't need to do this work. That's, we're still trying to figure it out. The other thing is, I think we talk a lot about leadership, and I think it's important for them to model inclusive behaviors and values. But a key driver to this work is really middle managers. That frozen middle is really, is really an important part of the equation that I think sometimes gets lost. And they've really got to be the folks that effectively champion this work on the ground. And to Kim's point, they need the appropriate training and development opportunities to just really enhance their understanding of inclusive leadership practices and strategies, so that they can really foster inclusive workplaces. And I think that accountability piece is, once you do that, once you have that data, you got to hold folks accountable. That it has to be part of their KPIs, because it's really, measuring and looking back to say, okay, where are we now? Are we making progress? It's really, really important to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I know you're getting in your lane and talking your talk. So please share with the audience what KPI stands for.
Key performance indicators, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem. We got you. Hey, listen, so I'm sure, and please put your questions in the Q&A for Kim and Tyra. But as people, I'm positive with our audience, we have people on the actual call that are interested in pursuing careers and doing the work like you're doing in DEI, or like both of you have done at some point in your career. Are there any organizations, resources that you suggest, recommend, encourage them to kind of look into?
Oh yeah. So one of our main partners is Saramount Diversity Best Practices. They have, a wealth of information and resources, tools available. And then, the Power to Fly, that, they're a great organization. Kim, I'm sure there's, tons that you've worked with as well that you can highlight. But I also think that folks should look at organizations that empower folks within the industry in their own communities, right? So like Executive Leadership Council, Council of Urban Professionals, there are a lot of resources out there for folks to, really engage with. Asian American Business Development Center. Look into organizations that sit at the intersections of where you exist and the work that you're doing, and folks that are out there doing BRG work.
Love it. And the National Urban League. We're always
In the
waiting.
National Urban League, of course.
We need inclusion. All right. So, hey, Kim, I want to tap in real quick about, let's go. Let's stay on that slide, please. I want to tap in real quick about investing resources into historically marginalized communities, because, you can operate as a BRG or ERG, but typically you're going to need to have a conversation with someone that's kind of sits up a little higher than you may be, to speak about those resources, or even investing back into BRGs. I always hear the leaders of BRGs saying they need a bigger budget to have even more impact. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think connecting with communities, Tyra talked about that 4C model, but the community piece in that is critical. But I think it's broader than DEI. That piece is critical for any company. And so at Bally's, we are very intentional on ensuring that we reflect the values, the aspirations and the goals of the communities where our casinos sit, and our players and our guests. And so that, that connecting with communities, that connecting with your customers and players is a critical component of our business strategy, as well as our DEI strategy. Because ultimately we want to enhance the communities where we live and work, and where we derive our customer base from. And so that is just a critical component to any strategy. So I will start there to say it is really about enhancing communities. and supporting with financial resources. But then, the other piece is that, the wonderful thing about the work of DEI is that you get really energized, engaged employees who want to make an impact within their organization and who want to make an impact within the community. And we'll talk a little bit more about business resource groups, but that's one of the ways to do it as well, is to really become active, to grow, to develop, and then to make those contributions. I like to say that folks who are members of BRGs are some of the most engaged in any company, because they are given discretionary time to really enhance the brand of a company and to connect to communities. And I can't think of a better way to demonstrate commitment to your company, quite honestly. So yeah, that, engaging with communities and community investment is just critical to a business strategy, and it has to be aligned.
I love it. So many different BRGs within an organization. I think it's powerful that a lot of those voices have a place to be heard. And I think there's huge benefits to that. We'll go to the next slide because Tyra, you were speaking about the importance of BRGs just in building internal communities. I started this conversation off today by commending you for talking the talk and walking the walk. I literally saw you walk in the door with an entire BRG group to an event, and everybody said no. Well, Tyra suggested I come, so I looked into it and was happy about coming. And they were so interactive, and it was such a team building to me exercise, but in a very different environment. So I just want you to speak about kind of how individuals in your role can assist and support in building internal communities.
Yeah. So, according to Forbes, 90% of Fortune 500 companies have ERGs. And we're using ERGs and BRGs interchangeably: employee resource groups, business resource groups.
Real quick, not to stop you, business resource groups, employee resource groups.
Employee resource groups, yeah. So that's the ERG, BRG. They different organizations use different nomenclature. We use BRG because we really want to make sure that we are aligning to the business strategy. I think the task for folks like me is to make sure that the BRGs align with the employee expectations, but also the business priorities, right? We need to make sure that we're clear about the purpose and the goals, and that we align activities to strategy and, lending support. But it's really important, I think, BRGs, they've been really instrumental to me personally. But, in fostering inclusion and improving diversity and, promoting that external community impact. Coming out to TEDx was, that was a really great event for everybody. They really enjoyed it. They got to be in the community, talk with other community leaders, hear from Darla Miles, who is, a reporter on the news that they watch every day. It was impactful. And it was a good place for them to come together and build community with each other. I think that we don't think enough about the benefits of that. Issa Rae did an interview once, and she talked about how she networked so much with her peers. And people think about, networking up, but the people that are alongside you and in this space with you and working with you, they know you well. They're the people that are going to help to advocate for you. And, when they move up, will help to bring you along. If they move to a different organization, to help to bring you along. But I think, internally, just waving the flag and creating community within the organization, a lot of times, particularly for underrepresented folks, you may be the only or one of a handful of people, and this is the one space that you get to come together with people that hold your same identity, or have some commonality, that you can come together and really, develop strategies for how to navigate the environment that you're in. I think, we don't always think about how difficult that can be sometimes. And so BRGs are, a really important aspect to creating communities internally that, make people feel like they belong, and they have, a network of folks internally that they can tap into when they need to.
Hey, Ken, let's talk about that a little. So as you moved in your career and kind of, transitioned out of DEI in a sense, right? How important was it to have that background in your toolbox as you moved on to C-suite opportunities?
Well, great. I like to say I moved into D&I from law, kind of understanding eventually I'd come back to my legal career and back in. I think every opportunity professionally creates new opportunities and also creates, you are developing more in that toolkit. And so, one of the great things about being a lawyer and having a legal background is that it provides you with just flexibility. Ultimately, you are seeing a whole host of different complex issues. You are a problem solver. You are enabling the business. You are helping to set strategy in a way that mitigates risk, that mitigates litigation resources, and you also have a high degree of access to very senior leaders, and that's certainly what I found in the earlier parts of my career. And it was those access points that the company that I was with at the time, when they asked me to step forward and lead DEI, it was that relationship capital that really enabled me to be successful. And I think it's any leader within a company, relationship capital, that networking ability is critical. That ability to listen with an open mind, that ability to counsel without judgment, to call out when necessary, but to do so in a way that does not does not create a, go against an incentive for people to move forward and to engage. And so all of those things are skills. Some people call them soft skills, but they're critical, I think, to being a good, strong leader, is the ability to listen, to learn, to counsel, to grow, to advocate when necessary. I want to come back to the point of the role that BRGs can play in that. And that is, in my experience, I have seen folks who wanted opportunities in management, who wanted growth opportunities and growth assignments, come to the attention of leaders and managers because of the work that they were doing on highly successful BRGs. And so I am a huge advocate for your BRGs and your participation also being a vehicle for your career development, because I've seen it every single day. You develop, like I develop some additional arsenal in my toolkit, so will you in doing the work with your BRGs. So I'm a huge advocate for them.
It's extremely important. Tyra, this bullet here, the importance of community building, right? Internal and external. But, one of the things that caught my attention when we were together at the event, someone spoke about, wow, how amazing must it be to work for a place or for a person that cares that much to offer this opportunity to their team, right? Uh, can you leverage the work of the BRGs and ERGs to support talent acquisition efforts, even retention efforts? Do you see that as something that's viable and existing?
Absolutely. I think that one of the areas of focus of our BRGs is definitely on talent acquisition, and we have some wonderful leaders who go out into the community and go and visit HBCUs to recruit. We partner with some great organizations like the Jackie Robinson Foundation, like
That's the
SEO.
eyeball.
Yeah, there's tons of BLK Capital, which is a student-led organization. We partner with some really great organizations, but it takes folks that work within the business to go out and make those connections, be willing to network with those candidates and wave the flag, to try to bring them into the organization. So there's a lot that goes on within that talent acquisition space. But, just to go back to the point of leveraging BRGs for your own career internally, it's a great place to take on stretch assignments. A lot of times we're in roles in our day to day that we may or may not enjoy, that sometimes flexes all of the things that we're good at, but a lot of times does not. And so you get to come in and really maybe flex some other muscle that you don't get to do in your day to day job. It is also an opportunity, to Kim's point about, just engaging with senior leadership, it really is a high visibility opportunity. And I think people really should take advantage of it. I think, oftentimes, we'll go to work and we'll come home and, not engage in some of these things, but they really can be beneficial to your career long term, to make those connections, to take on high visibility assignments and really stretch yourself beyond, the things that you may be doing in your day-to-day job.
As we speak about, visibility and stretch assignments, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch in on maintaining your peace. And this isn't, we have this position here as maintaining your peace as a DEI practitioner, but it's Women's History Month. And I know that, a lot of times some of the heavy lifting falls squarely on the shoulders of individuals like the two of you. Kim, if you want to chime in here just to kind of speak about, how do you go about maintaining your peace? You're in a senior level role, a leadership role, and I can imagine some of the things that come along with that. Just talk to our audience a little bit, please.
I think this slide here hits home. Yes, it is Women's History Month, but I think our experience of as Black women across the board in our homes, in our communities, in our workplaces, there's a lot of armor that we wear, and this is kind of a real talk. And I think maintaining your peace is having those places where that armor gets to come off, where you get to connect, where you get to be vulnerable. And what I say to a lot of people, about what's the most important thing that you can do, in your career as you progress, but I just think in life is to make sure your personal network is strong and that it is trustworthy. And that when that armor that we feel like we have to wear every day comes off, it is greeted with a hug and it is greeted with understanding. And so for me, maintaining my peace is my sister friend circle. Some who have been with me since childhood. It's my new network of people that I have grown up with professionally. My dear friend in Chicago, we grew up as lawyers together, and we call ourselves sisters in law. Because that community has been vital to us as we have navigated our career. I think one of the things that happens the more senior you get is that the more lonely it becomes because there are fewer and fewer of us. So that external network is just critical. And so maintaining my peace is keeping my network strong and healthy and always being there for others. And then also just being really honest about when I need to tap into that community and not waiting until the last minute. And so, yes, that sister circle, that brother circle, those circles, and they're even far more diverse than that, just have to be intact and strong. And I spend a lot of time maintaining them.
I was going to say, I need you to talk about the brother circle. I call you all.
Yes, no. We already started there where we said, we lift as we climb. We think, and my circles are filled with a lot of brothers, in law and otherwise, to also give me that perspective. What I say is, if the question is that we say, is it just me? I need somebody to say, yes, it is just you, and you need to do X, so that we have real mirrors and not people who are just going to fluff our feathers. So yes, we get a lot of that.
So important, so important. Tyra, listen, there's some pushback on DEI out here, a lot of
Yeah.
it. And you're doing the day-to-day, you're holding the title. I just would imagine that, at times that's a very stressful situation. Talk to us about your process to maintaining your peace as a practitioner.
Oh, I think, when I think about this work, it's like, a pendulum, right? It swings in one direction and then it comes back in another. And we are seeing lots of challenges to the work that we're doing. But I think that uh, organizations and leaders who are smart understand that they've got to keep their foot on the pedal because, just the demographics of our country is changing, and so this work is important. That's first and foremost. I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement that what we do is important, and the folks that are really going to benefit are the ones that don't take their foot off the gas. But from the perspective of a practitioner in trying to continue to drive it forward, when all of these challenges, are, creating headwinds, there's a couple of things. So, being intentional about what you watch and read and listen to, I think is really important. After George Floyd, I actually swore off watching video. And I know that it's a really important component of activism to really put it out there so people can see what's happening. But for me personally, it was just too much. So I'll read articles and I'll digest of the content, but the video for me personally is just too much. So I'm just really intentional about that. I think that we also have to realize that, and I mentioned this earlier, DEI done right is not something that happens overnight. It is, it's a process and it takes time, and it takes real intentionality. And I think that you have to set your own measures for success and not, and not let others' definitions of success inform how you go about the work. I think it's really important that we look at it from the perspective of, are people feeling seen and heard and valued versus, the number of initiatives we're able to execute in a year. And then, lastly, Kim already touched on this, seeking out your community and having a support system of folks that you can lean on, other people who, work in this space, as well as just, other professionals within your organization, other organizations that are similarly situated. It's important to have people that you can call on and lean on. And lastly, rest. You have to take pauses and you have to rest. And her name is escaping me right now, but she has a whole platform about rest being a form of resistance, and I think it's important for us all to really lean into that.
And I sincerely leaned on you today, and Kim, I just appreciate you guys showing up for us here on the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series platform. Listen, let's jump into Q&A. Please, audience, we got two leaders here, so drop your questions into the Q&A, and I'll try to get to them. But first, I want to start here. This is a question, either one of you guys can kind of jump in. I'm going to kind of maybe reposition the question just a little, but how have different states changing the funding support to DEI impacted your own DEI efforts, or do you have a view on it just from above? Anybody can jump in.
Kim, you want to take that one? No.
I think, for us, not at all. I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can't ignore the noise, and it's very loud. And I think, anytime you get that opportunity to sharpen your pencil, and challenge your own DEI program yourself, to make sure that it's hitting all of the notes that are consistent with the objectives of the organization. I'm speaking very specifically in the private sector, and not in the public sector where a lot of this litigation is hitting. I always view that as an opportunity. You have to, you talk about, in organizations, we do a lot of what we call a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You have to pay attention to the threats and the weaknesses to really ensure that your DEI programs are not only strong, they're relevant, and they're meeting the objective. So I say in the private sector, it's just a more pronounced threat that we have to understand, I think, and manage, and also manage many stakeholders. There are people out there that have a very strong viewpoint of DEI programs that may not be consistent with what we're doing. Your obligation as a DEI practitioner is to listen to those voices, and to figure out, within an organization, how do you address that in a DEI strategy? Some have a different, a different way forward than others, but you do have to really listen to those threats.
Tyra, I'd like to bring you in on this here because, understanding Kim kind of positioned her organization and how they operate in several different states. But I know you sit here in the tri-state, so I'm just wondering, has that impacted kind of your messaging or your role in any way?
So, we're a global organization, and so there are lots of considerations, beyond even the U.S. So, I think that in this work, what we've tried to do is just really look at uh, the strategy and ensuring that we're being as impactful as possible, right? And I think to Kim's point, the challenges are going to come, but it's, just important that we are making positive change and, it's incremental, but that it's going in the right direction.
Sure. We have another question here, and I guess let's approach it from, I don't know, even it can even be from a personal experience standpoint, but the question is basically talk about real-time success stories and middle managers being effective in channeling up to senior leadership. So not even if it wasn't from a middle management standpoint, but just from senior leadership to C-level, whatever that would be, right? But they're saying that can be a huge undertaking, yet doable. But I sit here with two individuals that have done pretty much exactly that. Can you speak to your experiences kind of navigating that transition or that journey?
I can start because this I feel very strongly about is that every position that I have either grown into or was promoted into was based upon my capabilities and my contributions and results. We cannot forget that ultimately that is your role within an organization, is to contribute to a results driven organization, to contribute to that. And along the way, you grow. And so I think the best thing that we do is to become more proficient, stronger, develop our skill sets. And if that's not happening, that's where DEI can assist, right? That's where coming to Tyra to say, I'm trying to accelerate my strategic planning skills. How do I do that? My manager is not being successful. That's where DEI can support, but ultimately you have to be in control of your development as a professional to make sure that you are ready when these opportunities come or when you're going after one. And so really kind of getting your professional development plan always in place, always sharp. I have, a set of goals that I look at for my organization, for my team. I have my personal goals, and then I have what I call my off the grid goals, which are those things that only I know about. And they are all in a line with me growing in some capacity, either personally or professionally. And so really dig in on what your goals are and making sure that they're moving in that direction. Okay. And when that's all in place, when that's all in place, I think that DEI programs or just being the best at what you do is some of the best ways that you can come to the attention of leadership, or sometimes just being bold and asking for a meeting, asking for, the opportunity to learn more about what someone does. I do that all the time. I have people reach out to me and they just want to sit down and talk. And sometimes they're surprised when I say, okay, what time are you available? Because I think that that's one of my responsibilities as a leader is to help develop and mentor talent within our organization, and to share my story, to share my perspective on the company. And sometimes those informal opportunities are the best. So maybe be a little bit more bolder too, and not look for formal ways to make those connections.
Being bold, I love it. Tyra, listen, we're going to get to this last question, and I'm going to lay this on your lap here, right? Someone on the call says they work in the DEI field, and after the Supreme Court ruling reversing affirmative action, their colleagues and them have continuously talked about remaining relevant and strong as a department. Has that ruling had any impact on your jobs or strategies?
I think, to Kim's earlier point about that, the SWOT analysis, it's certainly a threat. And it's certainly that it's something that, we're keeping an eye on. And but we haven't, taken our eye off the ball. And we are continuing to drive the strategy that we put in place. And, you know, at the end of the day, this work still needs to continue to be in service of our colleagues, you know, within the organization, and their needs have not changed because of that ruling. And so, you know, we still need to really make sure that, you know, that folks are getting the development that they need, the mentorship that they need. You know, to Kim's earlier point about mentorship, you know, we within our BRGs, you know, we have mentorship programs because I think for underrepresented folks, those informal networks don't always exist for us. So we create opportunities for our colleagues to have more formal mentorship, and it has been, you know, transformational for lots of people. And I just want to tap into, I know we're answering this question, but I just want to tap into something from the previous question about middle managers. I think that, you know, a part of, you know, getting to those folks, because I do believe that was part of the question, is empowering them with the tools so that they can actually push the work forward. And I'll use an example. There's a terrific organization that we partner with called Year Up.
Yeah.
And we bring in students who have gone through a 6-month training program. They're non-traditional. They don't always have 4-year degrees, but they go through this program. And then they come in, you know, with a certain amount of training, but then we bring them in to our organization and continue to train them. But I leveraged, you know, my relationship capital with, you know, a number of middle managers to get them to drive this program internally. And it's been tremendous, a tremendous growth opportunity for those leaders to learn how to guide and mentor and bring along folks from non-traditional backgrounds that they may not otherwise have had the opportunity to do if we didn't have this partnership with Year Up and I didn't tap them on the shoulder to say, hey, I need you to step in here. And they've become great mentors, you know, to some of these candidates. And, you know, we've had conversions to, you know, full-time hires from the program. It's been tremendous, but you got to provide them the tools to do the work.
Indeed. Year Up is great. We're getting ready to roll out. Kim, any closing remarks?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. I think I want to kind of talk a little bit about the intersection of my role as a lawyer and some of these challenges is that DEI programs should be partnering with their legal departments to make sure that the programs, the initiatives are designed in a way to mitigate litigation risk. So one of the things that I will highlight for most BRGs is that they should be open to everyone within your organization. You know, even those, and, you know, and so we have this concept of those who are allies, those who are supporters. And the BRGs for those individuals are growth opportunities to actually do the allyship work that we talk about. So as part of that allyship journey, looking at data to make sure that we're asking relevant questions, but that we're not also using the data in ways that would be questioned or questionable. And so I just can't get off, you know, this call without ensuring that for those of you who are doing the work, you absolutely have to be aligned with what your board expectations are, what your executive leadership team expectations are, but also a partnership with your legal department to make sure that what you're doing actually would withstand either a legal challenge or scrutiny. Help them, let them help you get to where you want to go. I think would be my other message here.
Thank you. Listen, I just want to say I appreciate both you guys joining us today. This has been amazing. I know we're coming up against the clock here. Join us next, 2 weeks from now on the 20th, where we go with empowering futures, women leading the way in DEI. But you can go back to the screen. If you want to catch up with Tyra, if you want to lock in with Tyra, please go to her LinkedIn profile. She'll lock in. She's a networker and connector. I'm sure she will connect through with you. If you need to touch base with the work that Kim is doing and the work that she's doing at Bally's, please do not hesitate to follow her on LinkedIn and reach out there as well. All right, we'd like to thank you all for joining us today. If you want to stay connected to the work that I do, just visit the website, eastcoastexecutives.com. I live on LinkedIn, so you can catch me there as well. We are doing it again, March 20th. Women leading the way in AI and innovation. Excited to have Afua Bruce, Angel Bush, who is the president of Black Women in AI. So that'll be a great conversation. Again, I'd like to thank Tyra L. Orange, Ken Barker for joining us today. You two were amazing. I'd also like to thank the audience and the team at the Urban League Jobs Network. Corey, you're looking out, man. I appreciate you. Wanda Jackson, thank you for the opportunity. We'll see you on March 20th. Take care.